So let's start with the most interesting question in my mind. Dealing with Carl Icahn. He's kind of been in your kitchen for 4 years. He had 3 representatives on Take-Two's board. What was your secret to dealing with Carl so effectively?
Look, I mean, Carl actually wasn't on our board. We had
no, not himself, but his son,
we had
Brett,
nominees on the board, and you know, we pride ourselves on running a relatively tight and clean ship, and we had 3 great board members for 4 years. They did a great job.
But CEOs go, lots of other CEOs, you know, the first sight of Carl Icahn go running, right? Running for their lawyers, running for investment bankers. This seems to have worked out well for all parties concerned.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, generally the idea. Look, we've said we're here for all of our shareholders. That's really our job. And I think if you run, you know, well-organized company, you know, our company had no particular defenses. You know, we're here for the shareholders. And when someone becomes your largest shareholder, seems to me they ought to have board representation. Did
Carl himself or perhaps his son Brett have ideas that they shared with you that you employed at Take-Two? Again, sort of trying to get a sense of how to deal with an activist effectively, whether it's a Carl Icahn or whether it's a Dan Loeb or anybody else. Lots of CEOs have trouble with this.
Well, I think it's sort of insane that you wouldn't talk to all of your shareholders, whether they consider themselves activists, whether they sit on your board or not. I mean, I'm in constant discussions with all of our shareholders, and you know, there's no, I certainly don't feel as though we have some kind of monopoly on good ideas. And generally speaking, people who control big pools of capital are relatively smart people, and the capital didn't just drop into their laps after all. So for sure, Carl shares ideas. As you know, he's pretty willing to share his ideas.
Well, some CEOs don't take them, right? Look at Tim Cook, for example. Carl is urging him to do a much bigger buyback at Apple, and for the time being, Apple doesn't think it's a great idea.
You know, I think we've always had a healthy board discussion and debate and interaction. At the end of the day, our board votes for the past 4 years have all been unanimous.
Let's talk about the $200 million. And in fact, it's more, right, if you include some of the shares that Take-Two bought back in the open market?
We were in market. We bought back 4.2 million shares in market, and then this opportunity came up.
So 270 roughly in total.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is buying back stock now the best way to spend $270 million?
Well, we had talked about, you know, we're in a luxurious position. We have to admit is somewhat novel for this company. 7 years ago, the company was relatively troubled when we took it over. And,
that's an understatement.
And, you know, it's been a wonderful story due to the great work the team has done. And we find ourselves in a situation where both having refinanced our 4.375% convertible bonds over the summer and then through operations, you know, we are beginning to have a good deal of cash generated both through financing and through operations. And at any given time, you have an opportunity to do a multiplicity of things with that cash. You can reinvest in the business. You can potentially acquire businesses and build your business, and you can return capital to shareholders.
Do you worry at all about the precedent that it might set? The idea that, again, whether it's Carl, whether it's Dan Loeb, whether it's a Bill Ackman, whether it's somebody else, can buy a bunch of stock, get seats on the board, agitate, and then get bought out, which is what happened at Yahoo, for example, in the case of Dan Loeb, certainly creates value for the activist. The question, and it might not necessarily apply to Take-Two, but again, people look at this in a big picture sense, is that it doesn't create value for the company.
Well, it used to be a big problem, right? Because the days of green mail are long,
right? Yeah.
long gone. But in those instances, typically, those agitating shareholders are bought out at a premium or got other fees. Or, well, those days, never mind this situation. Those days went, that's a decade old. So in this situation, we bought in the open market at a price of roughly $17.38 on average, and we disclosed that we purchased the Icahn block for $16.93. Certainly doesn't seem untoward to me. It was an opportunity for the company to bring in a big block without moving the market.
What are you going to do about the board now that the Icahn representatives are gone?
Well, we're looking at that now. You know, we're going to look at board representation. I think it's safe to say we're not going to have a 5-member board. So, you know, we'll potentially add some board members.
And what about the company? Whether it's with Icahn or without Icahn, doesn't really matter. Everybody wants to know where you're taking Take-Two next. Are you going to be a consolidator or a consolidatee?
Well, I think we have the capital to be a consolidator. I think we have the intellectual property. I think we have the management team, and more importantly, the creative teams. We have the balance sheet, and we have the technology, and we're at the beginning of the next generation of consoles. And one of the unanswered questions the last time we spoke was, how will that go? And the answer is really well so far. And moreover, how are our games doing? Extraordinarily well. NBA is one of the highest rated games for the new generation of consoles, and we have more than 10 titles in development. If history is any guide, organic growth is our story. In 2007, excluding a non-core division, we had $700 million in revenue. The last time we didn't launch GTA, we had about $1.2 billion in revenue. Short period of time in between. This year we're projecting $2.2 to $2.3 billion in revenue, and we want to grow from there organically. The question is whether we can add on to that inorganically, and we haven't answered that question yet. The good news is the opportunity is there.
The opportunity is there to do more than one thing. You can consolidate within the gaming industry, and people say that maybe it's worthwhile to take a look at Activision or EA, Electronic Arts, and I'm sure you have, or perhaps broaden your vision to include other kinds of media. Are you looking at both?
We'll consider anything that's accretive to the shareholders. You know, the deal that we did yesterday is meaningfully accretive to the shareholders. When we look at M&A, we look at it through the lens of immediate accretion. That's somewhat different than other companies do. And we want to make...
You're not just looking at short-term accretion.
No, long-term value.
Long-term accretion comes from strategic vision, which is why I'm trying to get into the strategy.
Look, I think we've proven that we have a handle on the digital future. I think we have a handle on how to manage content businesses in that digital future. And I think we ought to examine any number of opportunities that are within the context of what our DNA is, which is making great digital entertainment properties and marketing them and distributing them worldwide through our own systems. So that could certainly contemplate other forms of media apart from interactive entertainment, but we haven't made any decisions yet.
Strauss, you made reference to the fact that your titles are doing pretty well. Grand Theft Auto 5 was a home run for sure. No other way to describe it. Continues to be one. What's next? What comes next out of Rockstar, the gaming unit inside Take-Two?
Well, I'm going to let Rockstar talk about their next titles, but we do have this extraordinary collection of intellectual property, and we have a history of launching sequels to our franchises, while every year launching at least one new great intellectual property. That's what I'm getting at, right? So both of our labels are focused on doing both of those things. As I said, we have 10 titles in development for next gen, but the titles themselves, the label heads get to talk about those.